Good afternoon. It is 4:03-ish on September 8th, 2025. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'll start with a round of attendance. So, Connor, you can start.
I'd like to work
Jackie Wiseman, School Committee Rep.
Stebbins, Select Board.
Overall Superintendent.
Wendy Nightingale, Finance Director, Town Accountant.
John Dugan, Assistant Town Administrator.
Jim Hamilton, School Committee.
And I'm Jennifer Stacy, Select Board. So just before we get started, I want everybody to know that we are recording these meetings moving forward, just so we have good record and we can direct the public to watch them as their discussions unfold during this very intense budget year. So, and the mic is here basically to pick you up as we get recorded by ECAT. So we'll jump in with we're going to have some regular ongoing discussion items as part of our agenda, and then we'll have new business topics each time we meet that we'll cover. So our first ongoing discussion item, I'll turn it over to Connor and Dr. Cabral, if you both want to share any updates on where we are with budget cuts, ongoing town school operations, and impact of cuts on member boards, policy planning, or current future years. So.
Would the schools like to go first, or would you?
Well, I can, but as is probably the case with you, we don't have a lot of changes at this point. The biggest factor this year is that we have 6 bargaining units up for negotiation. That's a multi-million dollar swing, so obviously that is really important, but we have absolutely no meetings on that yet, and so we have no information on that just yet.
So we'll just keep our ears open and keep that as a regular topic. I know that we're going through some similar at the town side.
Yes, so we have one union, fire union, we're actively bargaining for 26 and onward, and then the other 6 town unions are on a calendar for fiscal 27 through 29. So that, to Dr. Cabral's point, could have a significant swing on the operating need depending on where those negotiations land and the timing of when those land. On the town side, the cuts from the fiscal 26 non-override budget, I think are most acutely being felt in the fire department because in addition to those cuts, there was folks, as sometimes happens in a reverse seniority union, who have taken employment elsewhere, and so they're operating significantly below staffing levels that they've had for quite some time, and that's resulting in a lot of forced overtime, which is obviously not good for our operations, but it's not good for the firefighters, it's not good for morale, it's not something that we can sustain forever. So that's a real concern, I know, for myself, the chief, and the select board. Outside of public safety, as the year goes on, some of our departments are quite small, and so if there's a vacancy due to a retirement and other things, those are being assessed on a case-by-case basis. We've eliminated another job in town hall that is funded in fiscal 26, but I don't have confidence that can continue into 27. That's in planning, and so now at town hall, one of our departments took a cut leading into 26. That is closed to walk-ins half of a week, and in the case of the planning department, which is busier than it's ever been, they went from 2 admins to 1, and so that is now not open to walk-ins at all. You have to fill out a form for an appointment, and that's not the kind of service we want to provide, but they staff 7 or 8 boards, and they can't process, the permits for all of these different boards, stay on top of the agendas and the meeting requirements, and only have 1 admin. So some more cuts that we're working on there tonight, and I shared a heads up with the budget subcommittee. It's going to be the first of what I expect are a handful of presentations from various town department heads, informing some policy things on a look forward, on how to maintain our operations and critical infrastructure in light of structural revenue shortfall. We will have Public Works Director Field in, talking through to the select board about the status of our stormwater infrastructure, catch basins, drainage systems, things of that nature that we have historically funded out of Public Works operations, which were also cut going into this budget cycle. And like many programs and operations of the school and the town are coming under growing requirements of state and federal mandates, in this case MS4, stormwater management permit from the federal government, that often is either unfunded or significantly underfunded. So Dave Field will be giving a presentation on the status of our stormwater infrastructure, our current ability to fund what is needed, which is minimal and worsening, and some options that other municipalities have explored around the state, such as establishing an enterprise fund utility based on maintenance and use. So with an enterprise fund, it's a business-based account. Like with water, you pay for how much you consume and nothing more. You can establish through town meeting a stormwater utility where there's a variety of ways you can establish a fee, but what some communities in Massachusetts have done is they look at GIS data for the total amount of impervious space on your property, set a uniform metric from that, and they divide it out from there. And when you go that route, typically, unlike our tax structure, which is heavily residentially based, that would have homes be a much smaller cost unit than, say, a large commercial or industrial presence or institutional presence that has large parking lots and things like that. So we'll be starting a conversation tonight with the select board. It will require town meeting action. It's not something that would be ready for the fall, but we will likely seek a small committee budget in the fall, and with anything that's a major policy change, especially if there's a financial impact, I think it's a good thing for the board to consider. Reserving their rights if they haven't gotten it yet, but you'll get it in 2 hours. Consider appointing a steering committee with some citizen representation on it so they can work with the town staff and ferret out what those options are, what might make sense, because we will continue, much like when we were talking in the spring, even had the omnibus override passed, as everyone here who was on PACE knows, that was when you put the inputs into a spreadsheet and drag it out a few years, it gets hard very quick. Even if the community ends up deciding whether, if and whether to pursue an override at all in the spring, whether it's a menu or what have you, we have significant unfunded infrastructure needs and ongoing compliance needs for things across public works kind of jurisdiction that usually only go in one way. They usually only increase regulations, usually only gets more expensive over time with fewer resources available. So looking at other revenue streams, non-tax revenue streams, I think is prudent, frankly, given the condition we're all in. And so it's an important conversation. It'll be a public conversation that will start tonight.
Thank you.
So in terms of this year's impact, do you want information about that as well?
Yeah, a focus on this year and impact that you're anticipating.
So for next year, I will maintain that a couple of big service contracts like food service and transportation and negotiations. But for what we're seeing right now, we are reallocating some duties onto staff members that are not in the collecting bargaining units. And so we've had to do things like reduce the office hours and central admin. We have taken registration, which was centralized, and had to move it back to the schools because we don't have the staffing to do that anymore. We also have some unfilled positions that, as with the town side, some we are going without filling just yet. Others are really necessary, whether it's a special education program or a service provider. We're finding that for some of the positions, we're getting a lot less applications and a lot less qualified applications, similar to the fire department's issue. And so, however, for us, we are legally mandated to provide the services. And so what we are doing this week is we've gone to a couple of agency contracts for these specialists while we continue to look for positions. We're going to continue to try to fill positions, but in the life cycle of a school year, it's typically most advantageous from March to July to get staff members, and so it's going to get increasingly more difficult, but the goal is to try to replace the agency contracts with employees because it's ultimately more expensive to go through a third party. And then we are also working on trying to create some revenue. We have some collaboratives renting some classroom space, but then we also have our entire fee structure for people who make use of the facilities outside organizations, but also for sports activities and things like that for students. Unfortunately, we're going to be needing to increase those, and we are hoping to have all that presented by January the latest. So between some revenue structures and some unfilled positions and a little bit of reduction in services, but we're trying to maintain as much as we can with the level of service that people have come to expect from the school department. But if people are seeing some of those changes, we are trying to navigate how we're providing the, not services to children, but services to adults, families, staff. So we are asking for a little bit of grace as we try to change things. The beginning of school year is always tough, but then when you are then redirected for registration and it's different than what was last year, or you're redirected, you have to come back to central office because the office is closed, or we're just hoping to push out as much information as we can so that people know where they can find everything and with whom. But we may still need to adjust if things are not working as well as we'd like. So there might be a little bit of mercurial practices right now, but we hope to solidify that in the next month or so.
Thank you. Just for the record, Sean, Kelly Lamb from Finance Committee joined.
Yep,
So,
got it. Leisha, I realized, Mike.
yes, we're recording too. So.
We're sharing this one.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on the updates we just heard? I read an article somewhere, I can't remember, that said they're bracing for some pretty significant healthcare costs. Remind me when we get those rates from
GIC.
GIC, yeah.
Thank you. You typically overgo winter break. We
Okay.
get the range preliminary low to high spread, and they usually voted and finalized something in February.
Okay.
So as late as March.
Okay.
So
How much do the numbers usually vary from what we start hearing versus the official number that comes in?
in recent, well, as far as I could recall, Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, they give themselves a relatively comfortable range, but it's very clear from a preliminary range if you're going to have a bad year, right? I mean, it's not as if they have said plans are going to range from 10 to 17%, and then they came in at 30
5,
or
yeah.
5.
Yeah.
They've had a pretty good delivery there. Preliminary, what we're all reading about the markets, there are some communities that have smaller regional purchasing authorities who had to increase their rates as severely as we did in July and are actually having to go back to their town meetings this fall to increase that to a 30% increase, or else the consortiums will go bankrupt. So at least that's not what we're facing. Silver lining. But it doesn't look promising at all in the market, as far as I can tell. If somebody is seeing different, I'm happy to hear and learn about that. But the governor has filed legislation requesting the GSC stop covering GLP-1s and certain other medications as a cost control measure. But as many of us probably saw heading into this fiscal year, the GSC ran out of money for fiscal 25. I don't know the exact way that their budget is built, but if, like most organizations, they're using the current year as a baseline and building on it for the already then set fiscal 26 rates, I think that should give us all some pause that perhaps that 26 number, as severe as it was, may not have been high enough. We don't know that, but I would be pleasantly surprised if we're heading into 27 and it's anything but double-digit increases again.
Okay.
I don't know
that's
if
something we'll need to really, really
seeing
watch.
anything different in your industries, or?
I think I had shared probably the select board in August that premiums, and this was out of Illinois, so Blue Cross Blue Shield Illinois, my premiums went up 22%. I am on a PPO because I don't live in Illinois, so I'm not eligible for the HMO. But then you heard Blue Cross in Massachusetts say that premiums were going to go up significantly. So I'm, from private industry side, and that's a company, 300 people size with premiums going up like that. So.
Any other questions or comments around the updates, or?
I just had a question for the school fees. For students that can't afford the sports fee, are there still programs for them to help them be able to access sports?
We use the federal rate of income, and that is for not just sports and activities, but for food and any other expenses.
Okay, so that's still staying.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we can move on because I want to make sure we have some room for some of these bigger topics. So the next item on the list is the chair update on the data gathering format. Probably just take a few minutes to get any input or response on the template that I pulled together based on your fantastic questions. Thank you to everybody who provided questions. They were really great. I took them, some of them were similar, and was able to morph them into like kind of questions that carried or pulled details together in a more comprehensive way. And I try to lump them out based on some line of thinking around categories. I do want to reiterate, and Jackie gave some great feedback about kind of clarity on expectations around this. And for the most part, as far as board and committee updates, the idea was to use these as like a framing, a guided framework. So no one's expected to go in and answer every single question, whether it's Jamie or Kelly. I believe it's Jim. Yes, Jim for your group. So it's really about just capturing bullet points, getting the key ideas together on paper, and then making sure that we as a board know what's really important, what we're watching, what we're going to discuss more, what we may need to ask for more information on. And the other idea is that when we go to our boards and committees, we come with this lens. You know, Jamie and I will be sitting in the select board with this hat on at all times, being ready to ask these questions that, or flag these things as we talk about them. So that's really the intent. Sorry it came later than I expected. It was a little more work to pull together than I expected, and the end of summer was insanity. But with that, any questions, comments, or pushback, I'm totally open to any and all feedback on if folks want things tweaked, added questions, whatever it may be.
I'll just say, Jen, thanks for your update to the select board as well our last meeting in informing everyone. Obviously, we were fresh off that last budget subcommittee meeting and letting them know this format and how we were going to move forward. So appreciate the update. It was thorough.
Thank you. I believe every group did that as well. So they had some sort of discussion with their representative board or committee. How did those go? Any kind of conversation around them, or?
It wasn't a lot of feedback. It was just really kind of explaining what we had discussed and what we're going to be looking forward to going forward. I think we'll give the members this sheet so they can see what kind of information we're going to be talking about and looking forward to bring to you guys in the future.
Excellent.
And we did get good feedback. That is one thing.
Good.
Craig pointed out right away that huge benefit to the select board to not be waiting and getting the information in a more timely manner. As we told them, we kind of sped everything up so that by December, even November, we're really all in, just drawing a better picture of what it's going to look like going into the spring. So we're not waiting until kind of the typical time frame when we would normally be pulling and gathering all the budget information. So Craig and Mark, I think, also shared their feedback.
Kelly, how was the reaction in Finance Committee?
So we haven't had a meeting. I've been asking Patrick if he could meet with me. So we spoke a little because our meeting's not till September 16th.
Okay.
So he put me on the agenda to speak more about it. But he said that we are going to be making sure that everyone goes to their assigned departments to get feedback to bring back to the committee so that we can continue to answer these questions and I can bring the information back.
Yeah, that's a real value add from Finance Committee is the relationships you have with the department heads. I remember that was always a really great way to get more information. So that'll be a great avenue for updates that we'll be able to work with. So if there are any questions or comments, feel free to speak them now. Otherwise, I'm still open to taking anything as you go through and work with your boards and committees on these. If there's something missing, if something's not clear in the language up top, or it's too wordy, or something's not working for you, just send me an email and we can always tweak it. I kind of considering it a living document, so we can always change as needed. So with that, why don't we move on to the quick report outs from each member board. And again, these are just like 3 to 5 minutes. You can do bullet points or whatever format works. Do you care to start with you?
We really didn't
we don't-
prepare anything for this time because we were just kind of getting the information together, and there's not school year just started, so we don't have a lot of information right now.
That's an update in itself. so.
Okay.
Excellent.
We meet with our leadership team meeting is tomorrow.
Okay.
We meet on Tuesdays. So I went over this with the E-team today.
Yep.
And got some initial thoughts. It was really just orienting them to the document to do what we just discussed, how we were going to do this going forward. I'll explain it to the cabinet and the leadership team tomorrow. And then before every meeting, I think Jim and I and our finance director can meet and get the summary ready beforehand.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. And you haven't had a meeting yet, so we'll,
But is this document ready to share? Can we share
yeah,
that
you
with our
can
boards?
share it.
Okay.
And again, if there's feedback, I'll send you updates if any come through. But I imagine nothing is going to be dramatic because I haven't got any feedback on email, and everyone seems pretty okay with it. So, if we make small tweaks, I can always resend out a new version. But I'd say go ahead and use it, give it to your board members, and just get them thinking with that lens at all times. So,
Perfect.
Jamie, you want to share select board notes you have?
Yeah, and I think we're kind of in the same boat where this will probably be good tonight
Yeah.
to go back over this now that we have the document and just get more feedback. I think they'll be vocal about it. And
Yeah.
So I would suspect that, next meeting we'll have more information.
Yeah, there was one topic that came up that got me thinking about, and this question for you, Connor, is when should we be concerned about the costs of keeping lawyers on retainer and whatnot, depending on what's going on? So this is specific to the rent control board. We had the meeting and there's a lot of legal time, and I got thinking, is there an impact that we have to be aware of if we have a year where there's heavy activity?
Sure. So thankfully, the law firm that we work with, Mead, Tallerman and Acosta, is a really great. Not only they're very competent legally and have represented us well on what we need. We have a flat monthly retainer cost that covers most, general questions, counsel, whether for staff, boards. And it's only for kind of special litigation where there's an hourly rate. The hourly rate's, frankly, quite good in the town's favor. Wendy and I closely monitor that every year. We have not had to increase the legal services budget in a very long time.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
great.
several years.
And,
Excellent.
So
So-
we have a very good relationship with council. We have a lot of department heads who've been in play for quite a while and know, when we should and need to and when we don't. But even, because we have that flat retainer
Yep.
for general services, it's not a question where we have somebody has a question about a regulatory decision and says, well, I don't want to get hit with a billable hour. So it's worked well and it hasn't posed any meaningful challenge to.
Good.
Now that I've said that, something bad will happen.
My fault.
You do have negotiations coming up. That will
Easy
increase
and
the-
smooth. And
They're wonderful to work with, so
Yes.
hopefully they.
No, it's a good question. But so we have our general relationship with Mead, Tallerman, and Acosta, and then we have specialized counsel for things that come up occasionally, like cable regulations, which I think there's like 3 lawyers in America who specialize in maybe. That's really the only special counsel we've been using recently. You occasionally have special counsel for
Labor.
bonding. Labor counsel
Right.
is also under MTC though, so
It is, but that's
its own account.
that's separate
Yeah.
from the
from the
8,000.
general relationship.
Okay.
But,
Well, it's reassuring. You guys have enough years of looking at this in the past to know the
yes, and we
ups and
follow
downs.
it,
so.
month to month. I'm sure Wendy follows it closer than I do more regularly, but we
Yeah.
have not had any major issues with that budget. That's been pretty stable.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Connor.
Sure.
Any before we move on to the next agenda item, any questions or comments around the updates from the boards or the document? All right. I think it's back to you, Connor, to have. This is actually the piece of the meeting I was most interested in us really tackling from a discussion standpoint, digging into the options around overrides, which will be important to us as we consider what our recommendation may be in a pretty short time, actually.
Yes, thank you. Sean, is there an extra one of those handouts? Because I don't have it.
What do you need?
So apologies in advance. This is obviously probably still warm from a printer, but in my defense, most of it is just a summary of the DOR manual that I sent in advance. However, I know that that's very kind of jargony and not the easiest to read. So this is really a combination of items 4 and 5. It's a summary of the Department of Revenue manual as far as how communities can approach an override, as far as ballot questions. There's a very, a small amount of discussion here about the timing and order of events, and then a draft solely to inform discussion with subcommittee and then your member boards of if there is consensus, desire from the elected boards to consider an override going into fiscal 27, then we have to start making some decisions pretty soon, frankly. We don't have to be putting pen to paper and saying it's exactly this for this department, but obviously for myself, for Dr. Cabral, for our staff, there's a very big difference between putting one budget together and two. And the sooner we know that, the better. And frankly, for the community's sake, I think the sooner they know that this is a potential and what does that look like. We know for certain it does not look like option 3 from the memo I gave in July, which is just try the same thing again for the current fiscal year. That's off the table.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add something to your timeline conversation? Just a reminder about the school year.
Yes.
And how, for the school department, the preferred time to notify any staff of any layoffs is the first week of April.
Right.
And so that's just an important consideration in all of this because, as Connor said, not that our budget is more difficult, it's just that the timeline makes it more complex in that the sooner we know, the better, because we're making decisions about potential layoffs from January to March, with them actually coming to fruition in April. So the sooner we know things, the better.
So the upside, if the leadership view is pursue ballot or multiple questions via a menu, one of the things we had talked about in July is whether that the order of events, you could either have the town meeting first with 2 budgets, a contingent article, and then a ballot, or you could have a ballot first, and then the question is somewhat settled, and you go to town meeting, you have the budget. There's pros and cons to both. We have done the former, and it's clearly not worked, frankly. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it the other way, but this, to be conservative, is assuming that it's at the April election because that's sooner. There's certain triggers in the law for notice for the select board to vote for an election. So this long-winded way to tie back to your point, Dr. Brawl, this would actually force us all to be in a position of taking positions on what the budgets look like sooner. So that's better for notices. There's a real downside, though, as we were all just talking about. A lot of really significant budget information doesn't come due until late winter or spring. So we're going to have some pretty heavy caveats with, if we went this route, this is what we think the base non-override budget looks like, and then big red asterisk of like healthcare is outstanding, the governor's budget proposal outstanding. But that said, I mean, we've all done this long enough. We can make reasonably informed forecasts and have an order of magnitude. We know, even just from what we looked at in July, that we're looking at an incredibly severe, regressive budget next year, absent an override.
Right. And talking about the timeline isn't in any way to force the committee's hand to make any decisions earlier. It's just more informational that while we may be thinking from a universal stance, well, we have, March, April, May, without any huge changes, no, we will have laid off people by then. As long as everybody's aware, we just don't want people to be caught unaware, that's all.
So since I just provided this, I'll just read through, the kind of buckets on a season basis, and I'm happy to kind of take questions throughout and get feedback. The point here is to, I guess, make real how soon we all have to start making some decisions.
Do you want people to stop if there's anything missing they hear of in that segment?
Sure. So, and this isn't meant to be comprehensive. It doesn't have like the tax rate setting the fall town meeting, but this is really reverse engineered from an assumption of what do we need to be doing if the elected boards and leadership thinks that we need to make some other attempt in the spring. So fall, which is now, we're obviously ongoing sharing of impacts from a failed override, understanding, which we're starting this today, understanding the different approaches, orders of events, trying to identify is there a consensus of the members of budget subcommittee first, and then also getting feedback from each of your boards. on both the early forecast that was given to everyone in July that I believe everyone's board has received, and whether or not there's a position or opinion at this time from your board on an override for next year. We obviously don't know. I think sometimes, and you, the elected officials in the room can correct me if I'm wrong, it may feel uncomfortable to be taking a position when it's more of an abstraction than a specific, but what is specifically known and you can have confidence in is we are going through another bad budget year that will have more cuts, right? So the level of specificity will improve as time goes on, but it's not like we're facing a question right now, absent some kind of miracle, of do we go into 27 with level services and stem the bleeding, so to speak, and things stabilize? We're not, that is not an option on the table. So that is enough information, I think, for all the elected officials having gone through this. But again, this is why this committee exists, for you to say, no, you're wrong. Or you'd probably say it nicer than I would, but we need X, Y, or Z. And so, you know, for myself and the schools to provide you what you need. But so starting that conversation now, as challenging and as uncomfortable as that may be. The select board under the town's bylaws has to, by the end of this calendar year, establish the town election date in April. If there is serious consideration to an override question being on that ballot, I would think the board would want to know that before they're scheduling.
Okay.
So that really kind of forces this discussion to start this fall,
Okay.
and not, you know, after preliminary budgets are issued. Moving into winter, you know, heading into winter of 25, so you're looking at December, January. Again, if we are, as a subcommittee and as a team, considering a ballot as soon as April, we really would be well served by having some type of base budget by, you know, January. So we issued a preliminary budget this January. That was extremely difficult to do, frankly, because we just basically took the process we always do and advanced it. It is not possible, given the items that Dr. Cabral has touched on, given the unknowns in January, for us to have like a complete budget book in January. We just can't do it.
Of course.
But we've all been through this. We can have a reasonable degree of confidence of, depending on where the subcommittee and these boards land, we're not using stabilization next year. We know that's negative $2 million on the revenue sheet, right? We will know by then what certified growth is for this current fiscal year. We, in late January, will have an idea of what the governor's state revenue proposal is for Easton. We will know enough to have a kind of order of magnitude picture of the severity of operating cuts that the town and schools would need to implement without an override. Okay. And so part of that too then is for the elected leadership to start asking yourself and each other, are you comfortable making decisions with that 10,000 foot information? Because obviously there's a point of sensitivity in the community leading into the override attempt of wanting to know very, very, very specifically on a position by position basis. That's not going to be evident in January. There's just no way.
Right.
Again, we can have a good idea, right? If you need to cut 50 positions and you have an organization structured the way ours are, I mean, we can, I'm sure, have some concepts of what that looks like. But if the earlier you push the budget information and the potential community decision, necessarily the less confident and certain you could be down to that level of specificity. And that's a balance and a trade-off that we all need to think about.
I don't want to make this a complete oversimplification, but based on what we discussed last time, it's the baseline at this point is level funded, which at this point results in a almost $2 million deficit. Is that, I mean, that's quite an oversimplification of a very complex process, but that's basically where we're at
the
right
school
now.
side?
No.
Okay.
So if you go back to the July, again, admittedly preliminary forecast, assuming zero increase, not level service, which is usually what we try to target, zero increase, which will mean cuts, right? Because the cost of labor goes up, the cost of service goes up, the cost of supplies goes up. We're still looking at a deficit because we are eliminating stabilization fund use.
Yeah.
in this proposal. The subcommittee, of course, can weigh in that you think we ought not do that. We could talk about that. But yes, so Doc's probably right. I mean, and it's severe, much, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but much like we said all spring heading into these votes was that this is what every year will look like now until we reach the bottom one way or another through cutting expenses more or bringing those revenues up. That you back all this out, this I always feel the need to put caveats because we'll put this online, but ultimately it's going to be, none of budget subcommittee's role supersedes the school committee's legal authority at the end of the day to adopt the budget from the schools, nor does it change the select board of my legal authority to submit a budget. That said, we're all team players here and try to work together. If we're going to do this together, the budget subcommittee in the next 4 months between now and December really needs to be aligning on, do we agree with the baseline scenario that I put out in July, which there was general consensus and no major dissension on July, but I think it's frankly for all of us easier to align around no stabilization funds when it's an abstraction than when we are really looking at the real service cost of that to the public. So we need to align around that.
And when we brought it up at school committee members were aligned with that. Yeah.
Thank you. We need to be having the discussion now on, I am of the professional opinion that the financial justification for an override existed last year. It continues to exist this year, although it was electorally rejected. That is not the same thing as the citizens' elected leadership saying we should try again. So that needs, you all need to make those choices soon. Do you agree on this approach, or is there another way you would like to maybe see a baseline budget, understanding the sensitivity of expediency versus confidence?
I think this goes back to what we said in our last meeting when we knew that this is the tough part of this, that we need to put this information out there. It has to be sooner, and with that comes the trade-offs. So
Just
I'm
clarity
100%.
on where the wiggle, where we may see changes. That's all we can work with.
Yep.
One way you could do this is we could borrow from the state budget process, where in advance a budget proposal is being formalized. For the state, it's legislative committees, but budget subcommittee could, with the information we have in the fall, establish basically an agreed upon consensus revenue outlook, where we say, based on the information we have, this is a reasonably accurate picture of what we expect revenue next year to look like.
Okay.
And then the departments would have to back something in to fit that.
And by fall, you mean November?
November to December, early December. I mean, by November, so we will have fiscal 25 books are closed. We'll have free cash by November. We will have, which will inform how much we could recharge stabilization. We will have new growth for this year certified, which will also inform what the values are for residential, commercial, personal property classes. We'll know the tax rate because the select board will have to go through that process.
And the shift.
And the shift on how much of that is on commercial versus residential. So we'll have good information there. We will know, or we can know with feedback from the budget subcommittee on where do you stand on stabilization, because that's, is there going to be a number in that cell in the spreadsheet, or is it zero? Right. That's going to be probably the single largest revenue hit this year, is walking out of reserve use. So yes, we can have a revenue forecast.
So as far as things go, I feel like I really would like there to be an item on the agenda for, we have the 20th is our next select board meeting, but I know we have a very packed potential agenda with some updates on things. But it feels like we need to have this conversation with the board I would like for you to be there, Connor, to walk through, just the select board has a role in understanding these pieces at a deeper level, walk through the formats with the select board. And I also would like to have a discussion on stabilization with them. So I'll talk to Chair Fulgenetti about getting on the agenda for the 20th for the select board.
And we could do that in October, like maybe our
not till
first
the
meeting in
29th,
October when you're there. And
28th first?
if you're willing to come and
Our
talk
next
to the
select
school
board?
committee about this,
I thought we started that.
I can let you
Yeah,
know the dates and
yeah,
everything.
sure.
Yeah.
It is special town meeting, fall town meeting.
November 10th.
Should we have some sort of messaging prepared for that date? on the budget subcommittee?
That's
Why
a
do people pay attention, I guess?
Yeah.
sure. Yes, there's certainly no prohibition on it. I think there's going to be certain items that are going to organically raise that, like if we're considering a stormwater utility, but I don't think it's a bad idea to be explicit.
No, I think that's a good idea. I
right.
think the more information that's put out there, the earlier, the better.
Okay. I just want to get through these bullets and then I'll stop talking.
Sure.
I promise.
Yeah, of
So
course.
late winter, early spring, we would really want to be finalizing the base budget and making decisions on, by this point, the decision kind of already has to be made. Are we going for an override of any type or not? And if so, what does that look like? And we'll get into that on the next section of a report.
Connor, I apologize. Did you send this to us electronically?
No, I literally just finished it.
That's
I will.
fine. I'll just scan it. I want to just make sure Joe's getting all of these documents.
We getting feedback publicly from department leaders and from residents as well in advance of a select board who by statute ever wants to make the final call, finalizing the override ballot language, including the ballot type if we were going to hit an April election. If that's the model that the community ends up doing, you have the override question in advance of the appropriation and in advance of the town meeting, and there's one budget. If you do it the other way, which we have done in the past, which is you have two budgets to be debated, you have to adopt a baseline non-override budget, and then you have a contingent one that if that passes, it's still contingent on a ballot. Either way, it needs to pass at the ballot box and at a town meeting.
So how would you do that with two budgets if you're doing a menu approach?
You wouldn't have two budgets. You would have the baseline budget that we're talking about, and if you had a menu, part of why I'm suggesting this timeline is because we have all individually and in official capacity heard from folks that there may be some interest in a menu.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, in my view, you want to have a really good idea of what that baseline budget is, because if you are, especially like some of the smaller departments, say, a six-figure increase to the police or fire department could be a huge deal to that department. But if we're off by millions of dollars on the operating budget, then you're raising the levy and still not even stopping the use of stabilization funds, which I think is not good financial practice. So what you could do is you kind of come up with this baseline budget in the early spring or late winter, and then folks in the community have a pretty good idea of, okay, again, this is if you're doing a menu. If we do nothing, or if every question is a no, that's what reality will look like come July, right? And it will be severe cuts everywhere. That also gives people the information to say, oh, I don't want that. And if there's a menu, theoretically, that gives people more choice to say, I particularly am concerned about this or that department. We have, as a leadership team, not done menus because often that pits departments against each other. And we're all one big family here. And if the organization's overall financial picture is not where it needs to be, a menu kind of inherently is a Band-Aid.
Well, I would say that publicly, my statement would be that we know this is not the sustainable path forward.
Correct.
And that's got to be the first
Right.
talking point out of the gate, is that no matter what we do with the menu, unless they all pass, there's just no way this is sustainable. So we've already...
Right. The menu gives the ability for people who may either not be able to afford or just fundamentally disagree with the bigger omnibus approach. I'll speak on the town side. I programmatically do not think I know we are moving in the wrong direction programmatically as a town.
Yeah.
That said, there is a fundamental difference between delayed responsiveness on permitting and citizen matters and not having enough firefighters to safely run the fire department. And at a certain point, we have to make those choices.
Of course.
So, that said, I've not been in Easton while we've done a menu approach. One of the things that we can do is certainly gather more information from other communities and see what methods they've used. I know Easton has done a menu in the past. I think it was like the 90s. wasn't around.
Do we know of any communities recently in the past 2 or 3 years that have done them around us?
I don't. I know a ton of people have gone for overrides. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know the exact style. I know the overall flavor is failure.
Yes.
That seems to be a very popular override flavor right now. So I will look into it. But we can gather all that. The DOR keeps track of that, and we can pretty easily collate it.
What about the pyramid approach?
Yes. So I guess before getting into the approach of Val, anyone have any immediate feedback to this calendar? I know I dropped it on you.
No, it just sounds like we all need to go to our boards and schedule time to make sure we get a pulse check on stabilization and then the override options that we're going to discuss in a minute. And we should do it as soon as possible because we'll have an October meeting and we can start digging into, I think, these questions.
So what does that look like for us, though? Like, how do we debate that and come to a consensus?
Well, yeah, so I'm going to put all of you on the spot now. You're reps of your boards for a reason, and the first question is there a visceral negative reaction to contemplating an override?
No.
I don't think so. I think there was a couple of comments about curiosity about a menu approach, yeah.
I think there's a visceral reaction to thought we have to do one, but there's agreement that it's
that's
critical.
right. I mean, that's from an operations perspective, nothing's changed there, but obviously from a community-based one. So I wouldn't expect the committees to endorse, whatever override may come without us knowing what it is. I suppose it would more be talking through the reality of the calendar, and also in the case of Finance Committee, they haven't met yet, looking at that preliminary take of the fiscal 27 outlook. And I don't think it's fair of any of us to ask any elected official to take a vote before the end of September and say, I think we must do an override that looks like this. I would like to know if there is strong opposition to even having that conversation.
Okay.
And if so, why? And are we willing to pay the price of not having that conversation? Because the price will be significantly more severe cuts into already weakened departments. I know that sounds very severe. I'm not directing it at you.
No, I haven't talked to my board yet to know how they feel. I mean, they were all in favor of the override, but the results of the election may make them think differently about seeking another one, so
Sure.
I have to find out.
I imagine it made us all think differently about whether or not to take advantage of a provision to just stick it right back out there
Yeah.
again. Right? It was not a unambiguous outcome, which I think
Right.
is all the more reason to get conversation going really early now if we want to try a different approach. So, okay.
I think we'll have to be realistic about the size.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we can expect to go bigger or even equal to what we asked for before. But
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair perspective, but that's the kind of thing we're going to want to get people to start weighing in on. And on building understanding of what that means, right? And the kind of fundamental trade-off, which is reality, right? That whether you do a substantially smaller one or you do a menu, it has to be crystal clear. Those are very, very much interim steps to stop the kind of free fall in certain areas. It can't be presented as, we're sustaining what we have, right? We are going to have to, and we already are in many ways, but it's going to continue and not all of it's necessarily bad, but we are moving into a fundamentally different period as far as how we deliver services, how much services we can deliver, what that looks like.
And I think people are going to start to realize that now. I think in the last few months, maybe it was kind of just theory, and now people are coming back to school and they're seeing differences. If they're coming into town to do town business, and I think like even going in the schools when the front office is closed,
Right.
I think people are starting to see
Right.
some of the effects now.
So thank you all, and again, I apologize I didn't send you something sooner.
No, it's all good.
Just a little busy. The next one is more straightforward. So this is just a summary of the document I did send to you in advance. So this is from the DOR handbook. You have, as a community, a few different choices for how you present the question to the public. Single purpose override, which I always call the kind of omnibus one. That's what we tried in fiscal 26. We tried it fiscal 16 or 17, failed both times. I believe that the last one that did pass in 2006 was an omnibus one, but I know in the past there's also been some menus.
Remind me, that passed after a failed one the year
It
prior.
passed after a
right?
failed one. And Jim, I promise I did not time travel to make this happen so that I'm being contrarian, but in 05, one failed, and they went back the year after with a larger number, and the larger one is what passed.
Okay. Very different
Wasn't
timing
there
now.
for 05 either,
Yeah.
but yeah, very different set of circumstances.
Yep,
Right? Cost of living is
absolutely.
different, a different set of. But so single purpose, we all I think are quite familiar with this at this point. We've done it. We tried. Menu is multiple independent override questions on the same ballot. Funds a different service or budget item. You could have separate questions to address funding for schools, police, library, et cetera. People decide on them individually. So it's like a true menu. Any or all can pass, and that dollar amount goes into a levy increase. The thing that I think some people sometimes get concerned with or tripped up with is, and it came up a lot in the PACE process, is, well, how do we know that's exactly where the money will go kind of forevermore? And the answer is you can't. You know, you do it that year, and then it raises the levy. I think the reality is where these are operating overrides that translate into human services through people, the mechanism that the town would have to do a kind of menu bait and switch would be to very publicly lie to everyone and then fire a ton of people that we hired. So it would be pretty hard to do and not something I want to do because I like being employed. But that, you know, the bigger risk in a community with our current finances with doing a menu is, let's say you have 10 things on a menu and 9 out of 10 fail, but 1 passes. You restore that funding for that department for that year, but if none of the other things that help shore up the overall organizational finances get approved, you're still heading into another year of cuts where all of those things have to be assessed again.
Yeah.
So again, imperfect, none of these are perfect, but that's a challenge with menu.
Yep.
Pyramid is a tiered one, Kelly, I think you asked about. That's multiple related override questions offering alternative funding levels for the same purpose. So you would perhaps, like our funding purpose was to fund town and school operations for $7.3 million. A tiered one, and again, I've actually never even seen one of these, so take this with a grain of salt. My understanding of a tier is you would say an override of, you know, have the base plan be $3 million for town and school services. And then it would be on us to explain to the public, what does that mean? You can't advocate in the ballot or explain. So that's challenging.
The example showed, like, in the document you sent, it said like school, like 14 positions, 1 blah blah blah. And then in another tier it'd be like 7 positions.
Yeah.
And 1.
So you can explain if it's additive.
Yeah.
But you can't advocate. You can't use.
You can't say to save
You have
4 or
to
5
save,
firefighters.
yeah.
to prevent layoffs,
Yeah.
Right.
even if it's true. I don't
Yeah.
know why, but you can't.
It's considered coercive.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you correct it. This is why I don't write these rules.
May I ask,
probably.
based on this definition, how do you define core services versus additional programs? To me, when I read that, core means legally required. Basic operations and additional programs seems like nice to haves.
Sure. So I don't know if there's an answer from a legal perspective, but I mean that's where sometimes where I would imagine a pyramid. I also hate the pyramid language, frankly, but where a tiered one could get challenging is
Right.
you really kind of start to get down in the weeds on that. I'm not certain.
And it was not to put you on the spot, but
No,
it's like,
it's
do
a
we
good-
all
but
decide what's
but it's a
core
good
and then-
question.
Yeah.
We have
part
to.
of that's part of the challenges with.
It seems like it allows you to be a little bit more general though too.
Yes, you certainly can be general.
And then you're not pitting departments against each other.
One big challenge I had with it was that I think from a general population standpoint, it's probably the most confusing because there's just these building questions, and I think people's interpretations there may be questions.
I think any of these approaches can get too confusing
It's true.
if you make
It's true.
too many options.
Yeah.
So it has to be really succinct and just a few options.
Yes, I mean that's a trade-off, right? There's more
It-
flexibility in the
yeah.
choices, and more kind of risk you run into that it can start getting a little difficult to navigate.
And the menu can be really specific if you do department by department. Like
Right.
say, you know, there's an emergency in a different department that wasn't funded. You can't use the funds, right? They're earmarked just for that particular area. Where if you
Right.
did more general one, you have more flexibility in how to use the funding.
Yeah, so certainly like a general and a single purpose omnibus is the most flexible. I'll speak for myself, but I think we all kind of heard it, that one of the challenges we inherently had and will continue to have, and it's not unique to Easton, it's everywhere, is, PACE documented to the end of the earth, what the intentions were, what the predicates were, but if people aren't necessarily consuming that in those formats, then having this just like large number on the ballot that just says like town and school services allows people to read into that what they might think or maybe disagree. So the general is certainly the most flexibility organizationally, but is a challenge in that regard. Menu can be super prescriptive, but then the flip side is we have an awful lot of departments, so that could be a really long ballot. That could get challenging. There's no perfect way, but I'm glad we're talking about it, because I don't want it to just be taken for granted that A, this is happening, and if so, B, that it's just going to look exactly like we've tried.
Right.
But here, so let's say you have like 2 million, and then you have, Easton Plus, and it's another 2 million, and then like Easton Gold Star is like another few million. That's my understanding of that. And then you have multi-year overrides, where you can have smaller overrides, where you phase increases in over multiple years. The example the DOR gives, question 1A would maybe add $1 million for this year, and question 1B adds $1 million for next year. You're basically just having the election for all of it at once. And says if a later year question fails, the earlier ones still stand. But that I can imagine would be challenging. I'd be interested to do some research on, does anyone really do that? Because obviously our operating and financial needs change so much year to year that it would be quite difficult to forecast into year 2 and 3 a number that is even constructive.
Each
And
one has to pass separately too.
Each one has to pass separately. And then there's also the question of, based on the information we have in the 5 years leading up to today, best information we have today, say we ask for, 2 or 3 million a year for the next 3 years, and voters say, you know what, spreading that out makes some sense, but then, a major federal funding cut happens next year and the schools have no choice but to, can we ask again? I don't know. But we can get more info on that if people are interested. I will, for the sake of professionalism, go dig a little more on my own part, but I don't know if those are super common. So I think you're probably...
It would be a little odd if fiscal year 27 fails, but fiscal year 28 passes, and
You just hold
how
on.
do you, how do you,
That would
how do
be
you
kind
manage
of, yeah.
budgets
Right.
like that? But
So weird.
Stabilization funds.
And then the next page is just the same thing in a table format, which I probably should have planned.
So I don't know, I think we've had some good conversation, but any like gut reactions, or does anybody feel strongly they want to ask any questions first of all about these? I had a lot of questions when it first came presented, so.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see if other towns have done
That's my
these
biggest
other
question
options.
too,
and-
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
and how they've been structured and whether they've been successful, and I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah, I mean, technically, it showed examples where you can combine these too. You can have multi-year pyramid, multi-year menu.
I think you are correct.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the DOR menu.
Yeah.
DOR handbook, yeah. I guess the question that would come back to yours of complexity.
It's way too complex. That's why
just the 2 votes thing was enough to cause a lot of
Yeah,
challenge for some folks to understand that there was a town meeting vote and a
Right.
ballot vote and what they each did.
Right.
So I worry about folks' bandwidth. There's so many things being thrown. I tend to think the simpler we can do, the better. But it's up to the full group of us to decide, obviously, what our recommendation is. Does anybody want to speak to any of them in particular or ask any questions? I don't want to put us on the spot to have an answer this week, because we said we weren't going to do that until possibly next month. But
I think more research is needed just on the success of the menu and the pyramid.
yeah, so really it's about the benchmarking
Yeah.
and understanding.
I don't think the multi-year makes sense.
You do or don't?
I don't.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It seems.
I do like the idea though of having the election before a town meeting.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to that. Dr. Cabral, you were talking about the April timing with the RIFs, and I understand there's some challenges last year where folks knew as the budget situation was unfolding, and then it was things may change depending on how it unfolds, and we all know how things went. from your standpoint, how critical would it be timing-wise to go one route or the other with, like, is there a situation for the schools where, yes, it makes a lot more sense to consider, again, we'll make the recommendation here, but to consider a ballot vote before town meeting, timing-wise?
Just the more information we have,
Yeah.
the better, because we don't want to over riff.
Yep.
And obviously, we ethically want to let people know as soon as possible if they are going to be riffed. Waiting until, being too conservative, and you wait until an end of May town meeting. If you're letting somebody know the beginning of June, for our industry, that is a very tricky time to be looking for a job. So it's just the sooner we can know, the better.
So if we were to move with the ballot first approach, the challenge I see is that a lot of folks do come into town meeting with their mind made up, but some do change their mind on the fly based on the information they have there. They go to get the information there. What would be the best path for making sure that we're able to educate the community without, we won't have that mechanism, I guess.
I think there has to be a lot more outreach than there was this time. I think
But
there
there
has
was
to be.
so much
I know.
outreach.
There was so much. That was
That's the
insane.
issue, Jackie. Who's going to do that?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is
Poor Tom.
the PACE committee did an incredible amount of work.
Yeah.
Works so
But I
much.
think there was a very limited audience. So there has to be a way to get more information to more people. I would talk to people, they didn't even know what was going on. And then having the election, the end of school break, they're just not even don't even bother me. I'm on school break with my kids.
Well, even that though, that's why we're flagging this now. If the schools in particular have a strong opinion on that, we would like to know.
Oh,
I have a strong
every
opinion
year
on
we say, every year,
Yeah.
every single year we say that is a very difficult week.
Right, but I also understand operationally having it during the school day is a challenge as well, right?
Not as bad
That
as
we would
having it over
prefer
school
that.
vacation.
So there'd be a preference to do a day.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we say that every year that's tough. And we understand that there are timelines that have to be followed, which is
Right.
why we just kind of say it and then leave it, because we respect that. But
Sure.
that's never good for
I've heard
families.
similar feedback out in
Yeah.
the community, so I
Because even when people are here, they're still doing stuff with their families. They're just not.
Saturday's a difficult day.
Yeah, they're just not.
From 10 to 4, the hours are
Well,
weird.
the
'cause
fields are
you can't go in
packed.
early. And
Right.
You can't vote at 7 a.m. and then go do the rest of your day.
Right.
So logistically, if we went back to a Tuesday, that would be, the schools would be able to accommodate that and maybe,
Yeah, we accommodate elections now.
okay.
Has anyone looked at the voter turnout on Tuesday versus Saturday?
The ballot drives for turnout. We have looked at this, and I know
Okay.
that people don't necessarily always agree with that, but that's what drives turnout locally is what's on the ballot. Are there contested races, or is it a contentious issue? People are going to vote. That said, I mean, we want as many people to vote, whether they agree with the proposition or not. No matter what day it is, whether it's by mail or early voting or in person. These are really important decisions. I know that a lot of folks, particularly elected leaders, have expressed disappointment with the turnout. I'll remind you, the turnout of this override was higher than any local election in a generation. So it's not as
Yeah.
if it was some outlier.
Right.
Sadly, just local elections around the United States seldom break. Even for an override, you're going to push maybe into the 30%. But
So getting back to the question about getting word out and education out, I mean, obviously, whatever we were doing with PACE didn't work because it didn't reach everybody. And I think, maybe we need to do a better job understanding what did or didn't work about that. But I think we all have ideas.
Jen, I think you're onto something about, so it wasn't just PACE either, right? Because
Right.
we all hosted at our homes and we
Yeah.
really got the outreach going through a number of people's different homes, and there was coffees and things like that. The RIFs go out, is it by the end of March or this past
They went out
Right.
April 3rd this year, I believe.
April
or
3rd?
2nd, yeah.
So the earliest that this election would happen would be what date? If it was
I think by bylaw you can't have it. It has to be the second half of April. it used to be prescribed in like the third Tuesday, and you now have flexibility that could
Yeah.
be. I don't quote me, but I think you're looking at
You're
April
answering my
15th
question,
to 30.
which is the RIFs would still go out before that vote. I'm not.
That's the town meeting vote. The ballot.
No,
No,
I'm talking
we're
about the ballot, and I don't think
ballot,
the RIFs
okay.
necessarily have to be April 3rd. I mean, this is why we're talking about this now. Is
No, but as soon
as a courtesy,
as
you want it to be as close to
Well,
beginning of
it's-
April.
yes, it's a courtesy, not only for them to look for their job, but after April, we start presenting more specific numbers.
Right.
People can figure things out.
Sure.
You want to notify them before they're seeing certain departments being cut by a certain
That's true.
amount.
Yeah.
If a certain department only has 2 or 3 people,
Right,
it becomes
you're cutting
abundantly
it.
clear.
That's fair.
So it's more of a notification as well.
Yeah, but you could do. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if the cadence was between the information becoming more clear and doing a professional and moral thing, is you're probably looking at early April. Those could be, if you had a mid-April ballot, conditional RIFs, pending outcome of the election. Yes, is that?
Yes?
Yeah. So that's an option.
It's a benefit. I think going back to, a lot of people do get informed by town meeting. In fact, that's where
Yeah.
a lot of legislation happens, right? Even though we don't want it to, we would rather everyone be educated before they go there, just as we had tried to do this past year. That's not the reality. A lot of people are hearing for the first time, right? Because we heard it. People would show up and say, shocked that there was even a thought of an override, or
Right.
that departments were in the situation they were in. So that's, it does take a big tool out of our hands
Yeah.
to have that.
Counterpoint would be that we have now twice had a town meeting beforehand, and clearly that is not translating into broad-based electoral knowledge.
So I think what I just need to know is what other things, Jamie's point of tools, what other tools can we lean on to get word out? If we go with the ballot first approach, should we suggest an override? And obviously, a webpage is one thing, and we don't have town papers anymore. I know, but we've got to, exactly,
higher.
so it's
So,
like.
so what you could do is, I don't think it's a result of not having those tools. I think it's a question of there's a filtering bias, clearly, of the people who participated.
Of course, but there were still some people who didn't even know.
Some,
I mean,
yes,
it's-
but like with all due respect to them, and I'm on camera saying this, like we sent numerous mailers to every mailbox in town that, like, at a certain point. But that doesn't mean you're expected to like know warrant front to back, but it was a constant feature. I think there's a public discussion of mailers. I think it's more, in my view, when I look at the mismatch between town meeting outcomes and election outcomes 10 years ago and today, I think that just says that there's a large constituency who does not agree with the proposition, and you don't need to go to all these exhaustive sessions if you ultimately the final say is the ballot, right? Does anyone feel that I have that off? I mean, clearly there's a large voting bloc.
You save many hours of your time just voting no at the ballot.
Yeah, and I'm not
Or
saying
voting
that,
yes.
I'm not saying that criticizing no voters. I just think like the evidence seems to suggest, at least among people who typically vote municipally in Easton, there is a large committed bloc that did make up their mind, and it was no.
Right.
So I don't think that means that those people all lacked the information. I think that I said in July, and it's kind of the same discussion right now, like, I don't think Pace didn't have enough meetings. I think there's probably some folks who looked at it and said like, nah, that's not for me, and I'm they're over here, and I'm not gonna waste my time.
But if
I don't know how significant of it, sorry.
Oh, yeah,
I don't
go
know how significant of a number it was, but all the meetings that we went to, and I know you had a similar experience on the town side, there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of questions that people had
Yes.
that we were able to supply the information. So for people that are looking for information,
Sure.
opportunities like that are very important to get factual information out.
And that's the thing, if we
Yes.
come at this with this aspect that there's nothing we can do on a communication standpoint to shift things, then what's the point in even doing it?
Sure,
I mean, we
and-
have to figure out where we can possibly move the needle. I mean, I can
Just
tell you.
need simpler messaging. I mean, going to
That's
the
part
PACE
of it.
website was you need a PhD to understand everything. They need much
So-
simpler messaging.
But then we
Well,
need the
short
people
attention
who,
spans.
but we need the people who are saying that to then so what can we do different? Because I mean, just asking us to just kind of guess and hope it lands this time, and I don't mean to sound defensive, but
I mean, I've already been
that's-
talking to folks in the community who've told me that they would support it this time if we had a different approach.
So we need to know what different approach, because there's
Yeah,
a universe.
well, the menu one is the one that keeps on trickling
Yes.
around. So,
And I think messaging is more hindsight than, because I do think it's really important to be transparent. But looking back at what happened, I think a lot of people were confused. And a lot of misinformation was being spread around. And then because of our answers being so thorough and complicated, I think it missed the mark. Like, I really do think, looking back, simpler messaging would have helped.
I would agree with that.
I'm struggling because I feel like around town, I think it can be hard when you don't know much about how municipal government operates.
Sure.
Like, you drive up Foundry Street and there's a pocket park being built, and then you're telling me you're cutting things, and my gut reaction when I first moved back to town and wasn't as involved is like, you're fine. I don't
Right.
I don't need
understand.
this park,
Yeah.
and I don't
Right.
think it's a good use of money.
Sure.
But now you learn that, I mean, I may still have that opinion, but now you learn where that funding comes from and
Sure.
how it can and can't be used. But I think the entire town government needs to look at what is going on around town and truly consider what the visuals are. And I don't think that saves you tens of millions of dollars trying to rethink what we're doing around town, but I do think it matters to people who don't know, and I'm not pretending I'm an expert now, but don't know all the inner workings of a $100 million system.
Right.
And that's just my blunt answer.
No, I
Like,
mean, I think
that's-
it's true, because I'd get a lot of questions when we were building that school. Why can't we just not build the school and take that money and use it for X, Y, and Z? Like, there's a lot of confusion, I think, about the different kinds of overrides, what the money can be used for. I think CPA funding, there's a lot of confusion around what that money is used for and where that's coming from and what that can't be used for. I don't know how to get that out to people, but I think you're right. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding over different funding sources.
And there's this philosophical feeling of when you're running a society with people who have different perspectives and philosophies, you should, in theory, be supporting the things that are more 80-20-ish support. Fire department's an easy example. I think at least 80% of people probably support taxes for fire departments. When you get closer to that 51-49-ish issues, your 51% of the population is pushing 49% of the population to vote and pay for something that they may not agree with. And I think that's where you might get these stronger pushbacks and I'm not saying that's what's happening, but when people feel that way, you might get that more visceral reaction to push back and just say no.
Yeah,
no
I mean, I
what.
suppose the challenge of that is unless and until we do a menu that's at that level of granularity, we actually don't know the answer to that, right? We know the answer.
Right, yeah, I'm not
we know
saying
the
I have an
answer to
answer,
doing all of
but
it at
it's-
once is not working, or hasn't worked. So, we would have hearings, we could do mailings and things like that. I'm not suggesting we would certainly, just like vote it here and not tell anyone and call the election and see where the chips land.
Oh yeah, just want to make sure we really pay some attention to it, because
yeah,
it was a big aspect of what paced it, and we've been talking about how we're not pace 2.0.
Correct.
And this is a big part of that. And also from a bandwidth standpoint, I want to make sure everyone
Correct,
here
and
knows that there's
that's
what
why
we're
I'm
on the hook
being-
for, in terms
Right,
of like helping to drive this discussion. And
Yeah. Well, and that's again why I don't mean to be pushing back on so many members, but like we have like no one working at town hall anymore. I just don't, under like the two of our departments on one on each floor, you literally can't get someone. So like I don't want to mislead that like I don't think the issue is there weren't opportunities for people. I think that, we have a lot of people, especially on our elected boards, that can meet with people, and we need to go out of our way, not, I think, to have an even bigger town meeting with 2,000 people this time instead of 1,300, but to go talk to people who voted no,
Right.
and people who may not agree with everything we're doing and ask why.
yeah.
And I think those are smaller things than what you're going to get with a kind of cold call mailer.
Sure.
That's just
That makes sense.
how I feel. I mean, we would solicit input from the public, and we could through budget subcommittee or these boards before even these kind of fundamental questions of what does a ballot even look like? Is it an omnibus? Is it a menu? But I think that we're just in a very challenging information and misinformation ecosystem.
Absolutely.
And, so
I think that'll have to be an ongoing discussion based on how we land with our recommendation on this and our discussion for our next meeting.
Can we also find out if the teachers and the firefighters and the police, if they're all gonna support and sort of have the same messaging as well? So not just the citizens, but hear from them?
we could, I need to just make sure we're like staying in all of our respective lanes when it comes to, unions have certain electoral speech rights that public officials don't. So we have to just be thoughtful about that. But yes, I mean, we could,
Get their input?
yes, I mean, we would invite them to the budget discussions for certain. We can't kind of say, because it would kind of seem inherently coercive of me as everyone's employer on the town side to say, give me your opinion, resident who lives here and is employed here. How are you voting on this ballot? But yeah, I have to give more thought to how that can be done appropriately and constructively. But yes, and we know in the past for the debt exclusions for Blanche Ames and for the building project for municipal that the unions did publicly weigh in on those. So we can. So thank you all for the feedback. I will make a note to myself to get all of you the portal from the Department of Revenue as far as tracking override results around the state. And
Thank
that
you.
does break it out by, I don't think it does it super clean, but like if you see like, I'm just making Orleans up because they just sprung it to mind for some reason. If it says like one date and there's 7 budgets and questions, then you know that was a menu. So I'll get that to everyone this week to just start kind of going through on your own, and I'll talk to some of my peers and see if there's any trends that are evident outside of a prevailing one, which is that voters are largely rejecting overrides.
Okay.
May I ask just what in those other towns or your colleagues you may be talking to, if majority of towns are voting no outside of, I guess, is there a sense even statewide of like tiers of towns where there's just certain towns that are maybe just, they can afford to pass overrides, they continue to pass overrides, and maybe they're just, we shouldn't even be comparing to them. Not that we do today based on the comparison towns, but just these, there has to be like some sort of ring of towns that are just kind of starting to separate from the rest or separating
Yes,
packs.
I mean, there are communities that with much more regularity. Arlington is one.
Right.
You know,
That's what I
they
was,
just
without trying to name
routinely-
names.
They just
Sorry.
do it every
Yeah.
certain number of years.
I'm not criticizing.
No,
but
that's public.
It's part
Yeah.
of their business model. It's sort of like we try to establish a community compact, right, which obviously was rejected, but it's the same idea of like we, as folks who live here, or at least a majority of voting members, value X, Y, and Z and accept that it costs A, B, C, and that in order to maintain that, we need to have overrides with some regularity. There are communities that do that. Easton has historically not been one. And again, not criticizing the town. What is noticeable is that even though some of the financials of communities are different, like there's a lot of communities who have been minimum aid only for a couple of years and are resorting to overrides almost immediately, and Easton's managed it for nearly 20. Oftentimes, a lot of the vocal opposition is similar. Easton happens to have one of the most conservatively spending general governments in the entire state, but you will still hear people call for cutting staff in my office that is half the staff of other communities. So you see that kind of similarity. I think it's a broad-based rejection of the cost of living, right? I think people are stressed about other fixed costs in their lives and utilities and food and other stuff, and we feel like the latest in a line of a revolving door of people putting their hand out. Right, and it's but the causes giving rise to it are similar. Minimum aid status for most schools in the state now, utility and healthcare costs exploding more in 2 years than the past 10, and there is an increasing amount of folks having a conversation that not everyone's as dramatic as I am, but I feel like we're looking at the kind of entropy stage of Prop 2.5 and having 351 cities and towns that are locally managed and provide amazing service results. We have great schools here, great public services, but it's inarguably super economically inefficient, right? Compared to doing things on a county level or a regional level. And the solution to that can't just be, amend Prop 2.5 to make it Prop 4 and then just tax everyone out of their house, right? It might make things a little better on the operations side. But I think there's a growing appreciation, certainly in our fields, and I would imagine among elected officials and residents who really touch this at all, that the growing costs of having the level of service that we, as a general rule, provide in Massachusetts, with so much of it being done on the local level, is just becoming incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there's only so many things you could regionalize or contract out or make efficient. And if your second biggest bucket of revenue is growing at 1% a year, the math's just not going to be there. So I know off the top of my head in recent years, Norton, Bridgewater, Raynham, Mansfield, and Franklin, all very nearby, all failed.
Norton failed too. I think Norton failed too.
Yes, thank you, and Norton. Not to be like super doom and gloom, but
No,
it's a good question, and there's a
reality.
pervasive pessimism and real concern. I'm sure it's the same with superintendents, Dr. Cabral, that the expense side challenges we're facing are so severe.
And the timing couldn't be worse
The timing's
because this
awful.
falls
Yeah.
when people also are feeling it at home.
Right.
So it couldn't be worse, really.
It's
That's
it is a bumpy time that we're all heading into.
So we have about 10 minutes. Any more questions or comments around either the schedule or the ballot options that there'll be more digging into? So just to kind of, I think the thing that really stood out for me for Connor's timeline was this BSC will need October to December to align on. And those 4 bullet points, I think, are the things we need to kind of get into our head that this is our work over the next couple months. And like I said, we need to get in October. We're going to be drilling into those on a deeper level. So the next item is a discussion, an update on the November 10th, 2025 special town meeting.
Sure. So we are going to have a special town meeting on Monday, November 10th. The warrant draft will be available at the select board's next meeting in 3 weeks. We had a very, very skinny capital budget in the spring because we didn't know what our finances would be come fall. As we all know, they're not great. So capital is going to be a challenge. And we'll have some routine business items like trying to replenish, to a certain extent, the stabilization fund. Some other items that might be on there. There are certain capital items, and Jim, this ties back to the challenge we have in these roles of we're going to have hard operating years from time to time, but there's also, sometimes 10, 20, and 50-year choices we have to make. One of those, we signed an IMA with the city of Brockton to finally have access to regional sewer capacity for the industrial park, which is something Easton's been working towards for decades. We signed that earlier this year. We need to get to work on designing and building a 4th sewer district. And so, you're going to run into that challenge of, we're cutting jobs. Why are we going to spend money on an infrastructure project? The answer is, in the long term, the infrastructure project sustains jobs and creates jobs in the private sector. So that's something that's likely going to be not full boat funding, but we need to start getting to work on design. Those are funded not through debt exclusions, thankfully. They're usually through betterments, but that's a real cost. So we're working on things like that. But that'll be, I think we'll have some pretty substantive articles, even though it's a fall town meeting. And again, I appreciate the feedback. And as the subcommittee thinks about it with your boards, if you want some kind of specific informational update coming from the chair or me or whomever, even though it's not a warrant article, we could talk to the moderator and see what our options are, because we don't want folks to feel like they're being blindsided either. So,
Okay.
any questions on town meeting in the fall? Okay.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is a discussion and vote minutes of July 28th, 2025. Any questions or comments? Looking for my gosh, I'm dropped. Motion to approve.
So move, Stebbins.
Second Wiseman.
Okay, so that's Stebbins and Wiseman. So all in favor? Opposed? Okay, so that was unanimous. And the last item is a scheduling of next meeting of Budget Subcommittee. It seems like this time on Mondays is more or less working for folks. I know it's not ideal because of work schedules, but if we do it once a month-ish, is that?
Do you want to do the first Monday in October, the 6th?
I was just thinking about the next select board meeting is the 29th, so this is the Monday after that.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would work for us. I don't know if that works for schools and finance committee.
Is the 13th, is the 14th a possibility? 13th is a holiday.
I cannot do the 14th.
Okay. I can't do the 6th.
We could
apologize.
try for the 29th. The challenge we have is that that's only 3 weeks from now. I don't know how much new information we'll have, but
I don't think school committee will have.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have it after the next select board because I want to get on the agenda and have a deeper discussion on it than we're able to do tonight.
Could we do Wednesday the 15th?
That could be made work from. Oh, what? Do we have something for our CCAT that night, Sean?
What night is it?
The 15th.
Wednesday
That,
the 15th?
we're polling numbers now.
Okay.
Is the, is
But if we did it a
the,
little earlier, we could make it work.
If you did budget earlier,
Yeah,
because
okay.
we polled them for 7.
7 o'clock. Okay. Okay, so we could make it work on our
4,
side.
right? Does 4 this time on the 15th, Wednesday of October work?
we have a meeting with the union leadership, which probably, well, not probably, may be helpful for this conversation, I'm not sure.
It's at that time.
It's at 3:30.
Okay.
3:30 to 5.
So about the 16th, is that
Thursday
possibly?
the 16th. This is like the world's worst bingo game.
It really is so difficult. I could do the 16th.
Yes.
I think so. I'm seeing it. I may be in Houston that week. I just can't confirm it at the moment. So if you can be here though.
I can definitely be here. I'll make it work for us.
Kelly?
I can be here.
And do we want to start 4 or 5 since we are doing a different day? I don't want to take more time from folks' work schedules than we need to.
5 would work better for me.
5 is better for you?
Jackie, does that work for you?
That's better for me.
Okay, so we'll say October
so-
16th at 5. And
Great.
that's the other thing we're looking at for CCAP, right? So we may just need to hard stop it at 6:30. Okay. All right, so we'll.
I suppose, Jen, since you're the chair of both, if we end up with a lot of substance for budget subcommittee, we can pull this group and see if we can shift that up 15 minutes or so if we absolutely have to.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
Folks out of here for you to have the climate meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. Okay, so if there are no other, nothing else to discuss around that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move, Stebbins.
And a second?
Second, Cabral.
Okay, so that's Stebbins and Cabral, all in favor?
Thank you.
Opposed? All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.